The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in September 1882, and Pierce Dalton held it in his hands long enough for the ink to blur from the sweat on his palms. After 3 years of waiting, his fiancée Josephine Murray was finally coming to Lewiston, Idaho, and his heart hammered so hard against his ribs he thought it might break through. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times during the lonely nights on the range, pictured her stepping off that stagecoach with her copper hair catching the afternoon sun, pictured the way she would smile when she saw him waiting. The telegram said she would arrive Friday at noon, and Pierce read it 7 times before he finally folded it and tucked it into his shirt pocket, close to his heart where the paper of her letters had worn soft from constant handling. Pierce had met Josephine in San Francisco when he was 23, and she was 19, both of them young and full of dreams that seemed possible in the golden light of that coastal city. She had been working in her father's mercantile, and he had been passing through with a cattle drive, dusty and road-weary, but captivated by the girl with green eyes who handed him his change and smiled like she knew secrets about the universe. They had courted for 6 months before he proposed, and she had said yes without hesitation, her fingers trembling as he slid the small silver ring onto her hand. But her father had been sick, dying slowly from consumption, and she could not leave him. Pierce had understood, had kissed her goodbye and promised to build them a life worth coming to, a ranch where they could raise children and grow old together watching the sun set over the mountains. 3 years was a long time to wait for anything, but Pierce had filled those years with purpose. He had worked every job he could find, saved every dollar that did not go toward food or supplies, and finally purchased 200 acres of good grazing land just outside Lewiston. The house he built was modest but sturdy, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace, and he had carved their initials into the doorframe the day he finished the roof. His best friend Cole Montgomery had helped him with every nail and board, working beside him through summer heat and autumn rain, never once complaining even when the work seemed endless. Cole had been Pierce's friend since childhood, the kind of friend who felt more like a brother, and Pierce trusted him with everything he had. The days between Tuesday and Friday stretched like taffy, each hour dragging its feet across Pierce's consciousness. He cleaned the house until every surface gleamed, washed the curtains Josephine had sent him 2 years ago, and picked wildflowers to put in a jar on the kitchen table. Cole stopped by Thursday evening and found Pierce pacing the porch like a caged animal, and he laughed that easy laugh of his and clapped Pierce on the shoulder. "You are going to wear a hole in those boards," Cole said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. He was a handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and he had a way of making everything seem lighter, easier. "She is going to love you just as much as she did 3 years ago. More, probably, seeing what you have built for her." "What if she changed her mind?" Pierce asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him for weeks. "What if she decided San Francisco suits her better than Idaho? What if she took one look at the mountains and realized she made a mistake?" "Then she would have written to tell you," Cole said reasonably. "But she did not. She is coming, Pierce. Tomorrow you get everything you have been working for." Pierce wanted to believe him. He did believe him mostly, but there was still that small voice in the back of his mind whispering doubts. He had not seen Josephine in 3 years. People changed. He had changed, grown harder from the work and the weather, his hands rough and his face lined from squinting into the sun. What if she did not recognize the man he had become? "Come have a drink with me," Cole suggested. "You need to settle your nerves or you are going to shake yourself apart before she even gets here." They went to the saloon in town, a rough-hewn building that smelled of whiskey and sawdust, and Pierce nursed a single beer while Cole told stories about the wild horses he had been breaking. The distraction helped, and by the time they parted ways near midnight, Pierce felt steadier, more certain. Tomorrow would be the beginning of everything. He barely slept that night, and when dawn broke over the mountains, he was already dressed in his best clothes, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his boots polished until they shone. He shaved carefully, nicking himself twice in his nervousness, and combed his sandy brown hair back from his face. The man in the mirror looked older than 26, but his gray eyes held an excitement he had not felt in years. Today, everything would finally fall into place. The stagecoach was due at noon, and Pierce arrived in town at 11, too anxious to wait any longer. Lewiston was bustling with its usual Friday activity, miners and ranchers and merchants going about their business, children playing in the street, dogs barking at passing horses. Pierce positioned himself outside the stage depot, his hat in his hands, his heart climbing higher into his throat with every passing minute. Other people gathered too, waiting for mail or passengers or cargo, but Pierce barely noticed them. His entire world had narrowed to the road leading into town, to the dust that would announce the stagecoach's arrival. At precisely 12:15, he heard the thunder of hooves and the creak of wheels, and the stage rounded the corner in a cloud of dust and sunlight. Pierce's breath caught in his chest. The driver pulled the horses to a stop, and the door opened and Pierce stepped forward, his eyes scanning for copper hair and green eyes. Josephine stepped down first, and Pierce's heart soared. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, her face fuller, more mature, her hair pinned up beneath a traveling bonnet. She wore a green dress that brought out her eyes, and for a moment Pierce could only stare, speechless with joy and relief. But then another figure emerged from the coach behind her, a man's hand reaching out to steady her as she descended the final step, and Pierce's smile faltered. Cole Montgomery stepped down from the stagecoach, his expression careful and guarded, and he did not look at Pierce. He kept his hand on Josephine's elbow, proprietary and protective, and Pierce felt the world tilt sideways. "Pierce," Josephine said, and her voice was exactly as he remembered, soft and musical, but there was something wrong in her tone, something strained and apologetic. She stepped forward, and that was when Pierce saw it, the gold band on her left hand, replacing the silver ring he had given her. The way she held herself close to Cole, not with the awkwardness of strangers but with the familiarity of intimacy. "Josephine," Pierce managed, and the word came out strangled. His eyes moved to Cole, his best friend, his brother in all but blood, and he saw the guilt written across every line of Cole's face. "What is this?" "I am so sorry," Josephine said, and tears filled her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "Pierce, I never meant for this to happen. I tried to write, but I could not find the words. I thought if I came in person, if I could explain." "Explain what?" Pierce asked, but he already knew. The ring on her finger, Cole's presence, the way they stood together like two halves of a whole. "Explain what, Josephine? We are married," Cole said quietly, finally meeting Pierce's eyes. "Josephine and I. We got married 2 weeks ago in San Francisco." The words hit Pierce like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He staggered back a step, his hand reaching for something to steady himself against, finding only empty air. Married, his fiancée and his best friend. The two people he trusted most in the world had betrayed him in the worst way possible. "How?" Pierce asked, and his voice sounded distant to his own ears like it belonged to someone else. "How did this even? When did you?" "I went to San Francisco 4 months ago," Cole said, and he had the decency to look ashamed. You asked me to check on her to make sure she was doing all right after her father passed. I was only supposed to stay a week, but you fell in love, Pierce finished, and the bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. You fell in love with my fiancé. I fell in love with him too, Josephine said, and she was crying openly now, her hands twisting together. Pierce, I swear to you I tried not to. I remembered my promise to you. I wore your ring every day, but Cole was there and you were here and I was here building us a home, Pierce said, and anger was starting to burn through the shock, hot and cleansing. I was here working myself to the bone to give you everything you said you wanted. I was here being faithful to you, waiting for you while you were falling into bed with my best friend. It was not like that, Cole said sharply. We did not. Nothing happened while she was still engaged to you. We fought it, Pierce. We both did. But her father had died and she was alone and I was there, and feelings do not ask permission before they take root. So when did something happen? Pierce demanded. When did you decide it was all right to steal my future? She sent your ring back, Cole said. 6 weeks ago. She sent it back with a letter explaining everything. Did you not get it? Pierce felt his stomach drop. No, he said. I got nothing. No ring, no letter, nothing but the telegram 3 days ago saying she was coming. Josephine's face went pale. I sent it, she whispered. I swear I sent it, Pierce. I would never have let you find out this way. I wanted you to know before we came, wanted to give you time to. To what? Pierce asked. To get over it. To accept that the two people I loved most in the world betrayed me. He looked at Cole, and the pain in his chest was so intense he could barely breathe. You were my brother. I would have died for you. I trusted you with everything. I know, Cole said, and his voice broke. Pierce, I know. I hate myself for what this is doing to you, but I love her. I love her in a way that I cannot fight or deny, and she loves me, and we are married now. That cannot be undone. You could have walked away, Pierce said. You could have left San Francisco and never looked back. You could have let her come to me like she promised. Would you have wanted her if her heart belonged to someone else? Cole asked quietly. Would you have wanted a wife who spent her whole life longing for another man? The question hung in the air between them, brutal in its honesty. Pierce wanted to say yes, wanted to say he would take Josephine any way he could have her, but he knew it was not true. He had seen marriages like that, hollow shells where two people lived side by side but never touched, never connected. That was not what he wanted. That was not why he had spent 3 years building a dream. I want you to leave, Pierce said, and his voice was steady now, cold and final. Both of you. Get on the next stage out of town and do not ever come back. Pierce, Josephine said, reaching for him, but he stepped back before her fingers could touch him. I mean it, he said. You made your choice. You married him. Now live with that choice somewhere far away from me. He turned and walked away before either of them could say another word, his spine straight and his head high. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He would not crumble in the street like a man who had lost everything, even though that was exactly what he was. He walked past the curious stares of the townspeople who had gathered to watch the reunion turn into a disaster. Walked past the saloon and the general store and the church. Walked until the buildings gave way to open land, and he could not hear the sounds of Lewiston any more. Only then did he let himself feel it, the crushing weight of betrayal and loss. He had spent 3 years building a future that no longer existed, had poured every ounce of himself into a dream that had shattered in the space of 5 minutes. The house with the carved door frame would stand empty. The land he had saved for would be worked alone. The life he had imagined, with Josephine beside him and children running through the grass and Cole coming by for Sunday dinners, was gone as completely as if it had never existed at all. Pierce found himself at the river without meaning to. his feet carrying him to the place where he and Cole had spent countless afternoons as boys, fishing and swimming and planning their futures. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, the same as it always had, indifferent to human pain. Pierce sat down on the bank and put his head in his hands. He did not cry. Crying felt too small for what he was feeling, too insignificant. This was not sadness. This was the death of hope, the realization that trust was a fool's game and love was a lie people told themselves to make the loneliness bearable. He had given 3 years to a woman who had replaced him in 4 months. He had called a man brother who had taken the one thing Pierce held most dear. The sun moved across the sky, and Pierce sat by the river and tried to figure out what came next. He could leave Lewiston, sell the ranch and start over somewhere new where nobody knew him and nobody would look at him with pity. He could stay and endure the whispers, the sympathetic glances, the slow torture of building a life alone in a place that was supposed to be filled with love. Neither option appealed to him. Both felt like different versions of giving up. He stayed by the river until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Josephine would have loved. Then he stood up, brushed the dust from his trousers, and walked back to town. He would not run. He would not hide. He would live with his dignity intact even if his heart was in pieces. The ranch was dark when he got home, and Pierce lit a lantern and stared at the wildflowers he had picked, now wilting in their jar. He threw them out, jar and all, listening to the glass shatter against a rock outside. It felt good, that small moment of destruction, but it did not fix anything. Nothing would fix this. He was sitting on the porch in the dark when he heard the horse approaching. For a moment he thought it might be Cole, come to plead his case or offer apologies that meant nothing, but the rider was too small, the silhouette wrong. A woman. Josephine dismounted and walked toward the porch, and Pierce stood up, his body tense. "I told you to leave," he said. "I needed to talk to you," she said. "Alone, without Cole there, I needed you to hear the truth from me." "I heard enough truth today. Please," she said, and her voice was raw from crying. "Please, Pierce, you deserve an explanation." "I deserve a lot of things I am not going to get," Pierce said, but he did not walk away. Part of him wanted to hear it, wanted to understand how 3 years of promises could evaporate like morning dew. Josephine climbed the porch steps and stood a few feet away from him, her hands clasped in front of her. In the lamplight, he could see that she had been crying for hours, her eyes red and swollen. She looked exhausted and miserable and nothing like the happy bride she should have been. "When my father died," she began, her voice shaking, "I was lost. Everything I knew was gone, and I was alone in a city that suddenly felt too big and too empty. Your letters kept me going. Every word you wrote reminded me that I had something to look forward to, someone waiting for me. But letters are not the same as a person, Pierce. They are not arms to hold you when you wake up from nightmares about watching your father waste away. They are not a voice to talk to when the silence gets so heavy you think you might suffocate under it." "So you used Cole," Pierce said flatly. "No," Josephine said. "I did not use him. He came to check on me like you asked, and he was kind. He helped me sort through my father's affairs, helped me close the shop, helped me pack up the house. He was there, Pierce. He was real and present, and I could touch him. And slowly, without either of us meaning for it to happen, I started to feel something for him. You were engaged to me." "I know," she said. "And I felt terrible about it. I tried to push the feelings away, tried to remind myself every day that I had made a promise to you. But Cole was feeling the same things I was, and we talked about it, and we agreed that nothing could happen. He left San Francisco. He came back here to get away from me." "But he went back," Pierce said. "I sent him a telegram," Josephine admitted. I told him I could not marry you feeling the way I did about him. I told him I was sending your ring back, that I was breaking our engagement, and that if he felt anything real for me, he should come back to San Francisco. And he did. He came back and we talked for 3 days straight about everything, about you and about us, and about what the right thing to do was. We knew we were hurting you. We knew you would hate us. But we also knew that if I came to Idaho and married you while loving him, it would hurt you even more in the end. So you married him instead. Yes, Josephine said. I married him. And I am not sorry for loving him, Pierce, but I am desperately sorry for hurting you. That was never what I wanted. Pierce was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the sky. Everything she said made a terrible kind of sense, but that did not make it hurt any less. Did you ever love me? He asked. Yes, Josephine said without hesitation. I loved you very much. The girl I was 3 years ago loved you with her whole heart, but people change, Pierce. I changed. The woman I am now loves Cole, and I think part of what I loved about you was the dream of this place, of starting fresh somewhere new. Maybe I loved the idea of us more than I loved you yourself. I do not know. But I do know that what I feel for Cole is different, deeper. It is not about dreams or distance. It is just him, exactly as he is. And he feels the same. He does, Josephine said. He also hates himself for it. He told me if you asked him to leave, if you said our friendship mattered more than his feelings for me, he would do it. He would walk away from me if that was what you needed. But you would not let him. No, Josephine said. I would not. Because I am selfish enough to fight for what I want, even when it costs someone else everything. Pierce appreciated the honesty even as it cut him. There is nothing else to say then, he said. You made your choice. Both of you did. I hope it makes you happy. Pierce. I mean it, he said, and he found that he did. The anger was fading, leaving behind only exhaustion and sadness. I hope you are happy together. I hope you build a good life, but I cannot be part of it. I cannot watch my best friend with the woman I was supposed to marry and pretend everything is fine. So you need to go, Josephine. You need to leave Lewiston and not come back. We are leaving tomorrow, Josephine said quietly. Cole has family in Montana. We are going to homestead there, start fresh where nobody knows what happened. I just wanted to see you one more time. I wanted you to know that this was not about you being insufficient or unworthy. You are a good man, Pierce Dalton. You are going to make someone very happy someday. Get out, Pierce said, but there was no heat in it, only weariness. Josephine nodded and turned to leave, but she paused at the top of the steps. The house is beautiful, she said. Everything you built is beautiful. I am sorry I will never get to live in it with you. Then she was gone, riding back toward town in the darkness, and Pierce was alone again. He went inside and lay down on the bed he had built for two and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next day he learned that Cole and Josephine had taken the morning stage to Boise, the first leg of their journey to Montana. People in town were full of gossip about what had happened, the story twisting and growing with each retelling, until Pierce barely recognized it. Some versions painted him as a tragic hero. Others suggested he must have done something to drive Josephine away. Pierce ignored all of it. He bought supplies and rode back to his ranch and threw himself into work. Autumn passed in a blur of labor. Pierce fixed fences that did not need fixing, built a barn he did not need yet, and cut enough firewood to last 3 winters. He worked from dawn until long after dark, pushing his body until exhaustion made thought impossible. The physical pain of overworked muscles was easier to bear than the emotional pain of betrayal. He spoke to no one unless necessary, and went to town only when he ran out of supplies he could not make or grow himself. Winter came early that year, snow falling in thick white sheets that turned the world into something clean and blank. Pierce welcomed it. The cold gave him a reason to stay inside, to avoid the pitying looks and whispered conversations that followed him through Lewiston. He read books he had read a dozen times before, cooked simple meals, and tried not to think about the fact that he was 26 years old and completely alone. It was in January, during a rare trip to town for salt and coffee, that Pierce overheard a conversation that caught his attention despite himself. He was in the general store, waiting while Mrs. Henderson tallied his purchases, when two men came in discussing a ranch foreclosure. "Shame about the Dawson place," one of them said. "Old Jim dying like that and his daughter trying to run it alone. She does not have the money or the manpower. Bank is going to take it by spring." "Someone should buy it before the bank does," the other man replied. "Good land going to waste because a woman thinks she can do a man's job." Pierce paid for his supplies and left, but the conversation stuck with him. He knew the Dawson Ranch, had helped with a cattle drive there once, years ago. It was a solid property, well watered and protected from the worst of the winter winds. If it was going to be foreclosed, it would sell for less than it was worth, and the person who bought it could make a decent profit. More than that, though, Pierce found himself thinking about Jim Dawson's daughter. He had a vague memory of a girl, probably 16 or 17 at the time, helping serve lunch to the drovers. What was her name? Something old-fashioned. Jane, Joan. He could not remember. But if she was trying to run a ranch alone after her father's death, she was probably desperate. Maybe desperate enough to accept help, even from a stranger. The idea took root slowly, growing through the long winter nights. Pierce did not need more land. His own ranch was as much as he could handle alone, but the thought of having something to do, some project to focus on other than his own misery, appealed to him. And if he was honest, there was something else too. A woman trying to run a ranch alone after losing her father. It reminded him of Josephine, of how she had needed help after her father died and had turned to coal. Maybe if Pierce had been there in San Francisco, things would have been different. Maybe he could have been the one to help her through her grief, and she never would have fallen in love with someone else. He could not change what had happened with Josephine, but maybe he could help this Dawson girl keep her land. It was not charity, exactly. If he helped her make the ranch profitable, he could ask for a share of the profits, or repayment once she was back on her feet. It was business. That was all. Pierce waited until February, when the worst of the winter storms had passed, before riding out to the Dawson place. The ranch was about 12 miles from his own, nestled in a valley between two ridges. As he approached, he could see that things were even worse than the men in town had suggested. The fences were in disrepair, the barn roof sagged dangerously under the weight of snow, and only one thin line of smoke rose from the chimney of the small cabin. He dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail, then knocked on the door. There was a long silence, and then a woman's voice called out, "Who is there?" "My name is Pierce Dalton," he called back. "I own the ranch about 12 miles east of here. I heard about your situation and thought I might be able to help." Another silence, longer this time. Then the sound of a bolt sliding back, and the door opened a few inches. A young woman peered out at him, her face thin and exhausted, her dark hair pulled back in a hasty braid. She had a rifle in her hands, not quite pointing at him, but not quite pointing away either. "I do not need help," she said. Her voice was stronger than her appearance suggested, clear and firm despite the dark circles under her eyes. "That is not what I heard in town," Pierce said carefully. "I heard the bank is going to foreclose on you. What business is that of yours?" "None," Pierce admitted. "But I have time and experience, and you have land that is going to waste. I thought we might be able to work out an arrangement that benefits both of us." "What kind of arrangement?" the woman asked, suspicion heavy in her tone. "Let me help you get the ranch operational again," Pierce said. "Fix the fences, repair the barn, help with the spring calving if you have any cattle left. In return, you pay me back with a share of the profits once you start selling stock again. No money up front, no obligation beyond what we agree to in writing." "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You do not know me. You do not owe my father anything." "I knew him a little," Pierce said. "He seemed like a good man, and I have nothing but time right now. Would rather spend it doing something useful than sitting alone in my house." The woman studied him for a long moment, her brown eyes sharp and assessing. Then she lowered the rifle slightly and opened the door a bit wider. "My name is Juniper Mitchell," she said. "I was June Dawson before I married, but my husband died last year from a logging accident. Then my father passed in November, and now it is just me trying to keep this place from falling apart. The bank gave me until May to catch up on the mortgage payments, but I do not have the money and I do not have the hands to make the money, so I am pretty well trapped." "How much do you owe?" Pierce asked. $400, Juniper said, and her voice cracked slightly on the number. "Might as well be 4,000 for all the chance I have of getting it together." Pierce considered. $400 was not nothing, but it was not impossible either. If they worked hard, if the spring was good, they might be able to raise it through selling cattle and horses. "Can I see the stock you have left?" he asked. Juniper hesitated, then nodded and grabbed a coat from a peg by the door. She led him to the barn, and Pierce assessed what she had with a practiced eye. About 30 head of cattle, half of them pregnant and due to calve in the spring. 6 horses, 2 of them draft animals and 4 saddle horses. A handful of chickens and 1 stubborn goat. It was not much, but it was enough to work with. If we can get all those cows through calving successfully, and if the calves survive to weaning, you could sell them for about $300, Pierce said slowly. The horses could bring in another 100 if you are willing to part with 2 of the saddle horses. That gets you to 400, but it does not leave you anything to live on or to reinvest. So it is hopeless, Juniper said flatly. I did not say that, Pierce replied. I said it would be tight. But if you also sell some of the calves and keep the heifers to rebuild your herd, and if I help you repair the fences and barn so you are not losing stock to predators or weather, it is possible. Difficult, but possible. And what do you get out of it? Juniper asked. You still have not explained why you want to help me. Pierce was quiet for a moment, trying to find words for something he did not fully understand himself. I spent 3 years building a life for someone who did not want it, he finally said. I have a house with nobody in it and land I barely use. Helping you keep your ranch gives me something to do other than sit around feeling sorry for myself. And if we succeed, I get a small share of the profits and the satisfaction of knowing I did something good. That is enough for me. Juniper studied him again with those sharp brown eyes, and Pierce had the feeling she was seeing more than he intended to show. You got your heart broken, she said. It was not a question, something like that. Then we are in the same boat, Juniper said. My husband has been dead 14 months, and I still wake up reaching for him. My father is 3 months in the ground, and I keep expecting him to walk through that door asking what is for supper. Grief and loss, that is what we have in common, Mr. Dalton. So if you want to work yourself half to death on my behalf to avoid dealing with your own pain, I am not going to stop you. God knows I need the help. Call me Pierce, he said. All right then, Pierce, Juniper said. She held out her hand and he shook it, her grip firm despite her thin frame. You have yourself a deal. When can you start? Tomorrow, Pierce said. I will bring supplies and tools. We will start with the barn roof before the snow melts and makes everything worse." He rode home that evening feeling something he had not felt in months, not happiness exactly, but purpose. He had a reason to get up in the morning, a goal to work toward that did not involve his own broken dreams. It was not much, but it was something. Pierce kept his word and arrived at the Dawson Ranch the next morning loaded down with lumber, nails, and tools. Juniper met him outside, already dressed for work in worn trousers and a man's coat that had probably belonged to her husband or father. Together, they spent the day on the barn roof, tearing off damaged shingles and replacing them with new ones. The work was cold and precarious, and Juniper proved to be both capable and fearless, scrambling across the roof with the confidence of someone who had been doing hard labor her entire life. They did not talk much that first day, both of them focused on the work, but Pierce found himself noticing things about her. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the faint scar across her knuckles that looked like it came from barbed wire. The fact that she never complained, even when her hands were so cold she could barely grip the hammer. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Pierce would arrive each morning just after dawn, and they would work until dark, pausing only for quick meals that Juniper prepared. They fixed fences and cleaned out the barn and checked the pregnant cows daily for signs of distress. As the days passed and the work progressed, they began to talk more, sharing stories of their lives in the cautious way of people who had both been hurt and were not sure they could trust again. Pierce learned that Juniper was 23, that she had married young to a man she loved deeply, and that his death in a logging accident had shattered her world. She had come home to help her father with the ranch, only to lose him 6 months later to a heart attack. She had no siblings, no other family, and the ranch was all she had left of the people she loved. Juniper learned that Pierce had been engaged, that his fiancée had married his best friend, and that he had walked away rather than fight for something that was already lost. She did not offer sympathy or platitudes, for which Pierce was grateful. She simply nodded and said, "People are complicated, love even more so." As winter gave way to early spring, the calving season began. It was brutal work, long nights in the barn checking on laboring cows, pulling calves when necessary, bottle feeding the ones whose mothers rejected them. Pierce and Juniper worked side by side through it all, and Pierce found that he was starting to enjoy her company in a way that had nothing to do with work. She was smart and stubborn and had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. She did not flinch away from the hard parts of ranching, and she did not pretend to know things she did not. When she needed help, she asked for it. When she could handle something herself, she did. One night in late March, they were sitting in the barn waiting for a cow to finish birthing. The animal was taking her time, and there was nothing to do but watch and wait. Juniper had brought a thermos of coffee, and they passed it back and forth, warming their hands on the metal. "Can I ask you something?" Juniper said after a long, comfortable silence. "Sure." "Do you ever wish you had fought for her? Your fiancée, I mean. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had refused to let her go?" Pierce considered the question carefully. It was something he had asked himself countless times during the long winter nights. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But mostly no. She loved him and he loved her. What was I supposed to do, force her to honor a promise she made before she knew what she really wanted? That would not have made anyone happy." "That is very mature of you," Juniper said. "I do not know about mature," Pierce said. "Mostly I just did not want to be the kind of man who holds on to something that does not want to be held. There is no dignity in that." "Dignity," Juniper repeated, tasting the word. "My mother used to say dignity was the only thing no one could take from you. You had to give it away yourself." "Your mother sounds wise." She died when I was 12, Juniper said. I barely remember her sometimes, which feels worse than the grief, like I am losing her a second time by forgetting. You remember what she taught you, Pierce pointed out. That is a kind of remembering too. Juniper smiled, small and sad. I suppose it is. The cow lowed softly, and they both turned their attention back to her. The calf came smoothly a few minutes later, and they watched as the mother began to clean her newborn with rough, affectionate strokes of her tongue. It was a good moment, a life beginning in the quiet darkness of the barn, and Pierce felt something in his chest ease slightly. 17 live births so far, Juniper said softly. Only 2 losses. That is better than I had any right to hope for. You are doing everything right, Pierce said. You should be proud. We are doing everything right, Juniper corrected. I could not have managed this without you, Pierce. I know I have said it before, but I need you to really hear it. You saved this ranch. You saved me. You would have found a way, Pierce said, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her voice. Maybe, Juniper said. But I am glad I did not have to do it alone. By mid-April, all the calving was finished, and they had 28 healthy calves from 30 cows, which was an excellent rate. The horses had also foaled, giving them 2 new colts that would be valuable in a year or 2. The ranch was beginning to look like a working operation again, and Juniper's face had lost some of its gaunt exhaustion. She smiled more often now, and Pierce caught himself watching for those smiles, enjoying the way they transformed her face. He told himself it did not mean anything. He was helping a friend, nothing more. The fact that he thought about her when he was back at his own ranch, that he looked forward to seeing her each morning, that he noticed the way the spring sunlight caught in her dark hair, none of that meant anything significant. He was not ready to care about someone again. His heart was still too bruised, too cautious. But caution was hard to maintain when Juniper laughed at something he said, or when she brushed against him while they worked, and he felt that spark of awareness, or when she looked at him with those brown eyes that seemed to see straight through all his defenses. In early May, they took the steers and some of the older horses to the livestock market in Lewiston. It was the first time Pierce had been back to town for anything other than quick supply runs, and he braced himself for the inevitable whispers and stares. But people's attention was on Juniper, not on him, curious about the young widow who had managed to save her ranch from foreclosure. The livestock sold well, better than Pierce had dared to hope. By the end of the day, Juniper had $430 in hand, enough to pay off the bank with a little left over for supplies. She was glowing with relief and pride, and Pierce felt a surge of happiness for her that was entirely unselfish. They stopped at the bank so Juniper could make the payment, and Pierce waited outside, not wanting to intrude on the moment. When she came out, she was crying, but she was also smiling, and she threw her arms around Pierce in a hug that was over almost before it began. I own my ranch, she said, her voice thick with tears. It is mine, free and clear, and nobody can take it from me. You earned it, Pierce said, every bit of it. We earned it, Juniper said firmly. She pulled an envelope from her pocket and held it out to him. Your share. 20% of the profits, like we agreed. Pierce looked at the envelope but did not take it. Keep it, he said. You need it more than I do. Use it to buy stock for next year, or to make improvements, or to pay yourself back for all the supplies you provided. That was not our deal, Juniper said. I am changing the deal, Pierce said. I did not do this for money, Juniper. I did it because I needed something to care about, and you gave me that. That is payment enough. Juniper stared at him for a long moment, the envelope still held out between them. Then she lowered her hand and tucked the money back into her pocket. You are a good man, Pierce Dalton, she said quietly. A better man than you give yourself credit for. I just do not need the money, Pierce said, uncomfortable again. "It is not about the money," Juniper said. "It is about the fact that you helped a stranger for no reason other than it was the right thing to do. That is rare. You are rare." They had dinner at the hotel restaurant before heading back to the ranch, a small celebration for the successful sale. Pierce found himself relaxing in a way he had not in months, enjoying the conversation and the food and the simple pleasure of Juniper's company. She told him stories about her childhood, about learning to ride before she could walk, about the time she fell through the ice on the pond, and her father had to fish her out. Pierce told her about growing up with Cole, about the adventures they had gotten into as boys, and it hurt less than he expected to talk about his former friend. "You miss him?" Juniper asked. "Yes," Pierce admitted. "I miss the person I thought he was, the brother I thought I had. But that person does not exist anymore, or maybe he never did. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see." "People can be two things at once," Juniper said. "He can have been a good friend for years and also have made a terrible mistake. One does not erase the other. It feels like it does." "Because you are hurt," Juniper said. "But someday the hurt will fade, and what will be left is all those years of friendship. The good memories do not disappear just because the ending was bad." Pierce wanted to believe her, but he was not sure he could. The betrayal felt too large, too complete. But he appreciated the thought, appreciated that she was trying to help him find some peace with what had happened. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of gold and rose. Pierce helped Juniper put her horse away, and then there was that awkward moment when he should have left, should have ridden back to his own place, but neither of them moved. "Thank you," Juniper said again, "for everything. I know I have said it a dozen times, but I do not know how else to express what you have done for me." "You do not have to keep thanking me," Pierce said. "I want to," Juniper said. She stepped closer, and Pierce's breath caught in his throat. "Pierce, these past few months have meant more to me than just saving the ranch. You have given me something to look forward to, someone to talk to. You have made me feel less alone, and I hope, you have felt the same." Pierce knew what she was asking, what she was offering. Part of him wanted to reach for it, to close the distance between them and see where this could go. But another part of him, the part that was still bruised and wary, held him back. "Juniper," he said carefully, "I care about you. These months have been good for me too. But I do not know if I am ready for anything more than friendship. I do not want to hurt you by starting something I cannot finish." Juniper nodded slowly, and Pierce saw the flash of disappointment in her eyes before she hid it. "I understand," she said. "I am sorry if I made you uncomfortable." "You did not," Pierce assured her. "I am just being honest. You deserve someone who is all in, not someone who is still trying to figure out how to trust again." "Take all the time you need," Juniper said. "I am not going anywhere." Pierce rode home that night feeling both relieved and regretful. He had done the right thing, the honest thing, but that did not make it easy. And as the days turned into weeks, he found himself thinking more and more about Juniper, about the way she had looked at him that evening, about the possibility of something more than friendship. He continued to visit the ranch regularly, helping with the spring work and the endless repairs that any property required. They fell back into their easy companionship, but there was a new awareness between them now, a tension that had not been there before. Pierce caught Juniper watching him sometimes, and he wondered if she could see his growing feelings written across his face the way he could see hers. One afternoon in late June, they were mending fence together when a rattlesnake spooked Juniper's horse. The animal reared and bolted, and Juniper hit the ground hard, the air rushing from her lungs. Pierce was beside her in an instant, his heart pounding with fear. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands hovering over her, checking for broken bones or blood. "Just winded," Juniper gasped, but she was pale and shaking. Knocked the breath out of me. Pierce helped her sit up slowly, and as her breathing returned to normal, he realized his hands were still on her shoulders, that his face was inches from hers. He could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the sunshine and grass scent of her hair. And without thinking, without planning, he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement, and Juniper answered by kissing him back. Her hand came up to cup his face, and Pierce felt something inside him unlock, some tightly held fear releasing its grip. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless for entirely different reasons than the fall. "Pierce," Juniper whispered, and there was wonder in her voice. "I am sorry," Pierce said automatically, then shook his head. "No, I am not sorry. I have wanted to do that for weeks." "Then why did it take a horse throwing me to make you actually do it?" Juniper asked, and there was laughter in her voice now, bright and delighted. "Because I am an idiot who has been too scared to admit what I was feeling," Pierce said. "But I am done being scared. Juniper, I care about you, more than I thought I could care about anyone after what happened with Josephine. You have somehow made me believe in the possibility of love again, and I do not want to waste any more time pretending that is not true." "Good," Juniper said, and she kissed him again, longer this time, deeper. "Because I have been waiting for you to figure that out for months now, and I was starting to think I was going to have to hit you over the head with it." They stayed there in the grass for a long time, holding each other, kissing, laughing at the absurdity of the moment. The fence did not get mended that day, and neither of them cared. They had found something more important than work, more valuable than any ranch or any piece of land. They had found each other. The courtship that followed was different from anything Pierce had experienced with Josephine, where his relationship with her had been built on distance and anticipation. His relationship with Juniper was built on presence and shared work. They already knew each other's worst qualities, had already seen each other exhausted and frustrated and covered in mud and worse. There was no pretense, no performance, just two people who had been through loss and come out the other side willing to try again. They took their time, careful with each other's healing hearts. Pierce spent more and more time at Juniper's ranch, and she began coming to his place as well, marveling at the house he had built. "She was a fool," Juniper said one evening as they sat on Pierce's porch watching the sunset. "Josephine, she was a fool to choose anyone over you." "She chose what was right for her," Pierce said, and he was surprised to find he meant it without bitterness. "And I am glad she did, because otherwise I never would have found you." "You really believe that?" Juniper asked. "That everything happens for a reason?" "I do not know about everything," Pierce said. "But this, us. Yes, I think my heart had to break so it could heal into something strong enough for what we have." In late August, Pierce proposed. They were at the river, the same place Pierce had sat alone and heartbroken less than a year ago, and he pulled out a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "I do not have a speech prepared," Pierce said, "and I am not going to promise you perfect happiness because life does not work that way. But I can promise you that I will show up every day. I will work beside you and laugh with you and hold you when things get hard. I will be faithful and honest and present, and I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live. Juniper Mitchell, will you marry me?" "Yes," Juniper said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Pierce, of course yes." They were married in September, exactly 1 year after the telegram that had changed Pierce's life. It was a small ceremony in Lewiston, with a handful of friends and neighbors in attendance. Juniper wore a simple cream-colored dress, and Pierce wore his best suit, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Pierce kissed her and felt like he had finally come home. They decided to live at Pierce's ranch since the house was larger and in better condition, but they kept Juniper's property as well, running the two ranches as a single operation. It was hard work managing that much land and stock, but they thrived on the challenge. They hired a hand to help with the heaviest labor, a young man named David who was eager to learn and willing to work for modest wages while he saved money to buy his own place someday. The first winter of their marriage was the happiest time Pierce could remember. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but that just meant more time together, talking and making love and planning their future. Juniper was pregnant by spring, and Pierce found himself overwhelmed with excitement and terror in equal measure. He had thought about being a father during his engagement to Josephine, but it had always been an abstract concept, something far in the future. Now it was real and immediate, and he lay awake at night with his hand on Juniper's growing belly, feeling the baby move beneath his palm. Their son was born in October of 1884, a squalling red-faced infant with a powerful set of lungs. They named him James, after Juniper's father, and Pierce felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Holding his son for the first time, seeing Juniper exhausted and beautiful and triumphant in the bed, Pierce thought about how close he had come to missing all of this. If Josephine had married him, if she had come to Idaho as planned, he would have been living a different life, a lesser life, one without Juniper and James and this overwhelming sense of rightness. "What are you thinking?" Juniper asked, watching him hold their son. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Pierce said honestly. The years that followed were full in the way that good lives are full, with work and joy and occasional hardship. They had two more children, a daughter named Clara in 1886 and another son named Thomas in 1888. The ranch prospered, and they were able to buy more land, expanding their operation until they were one of the more successful outfits in the region. Pierce and Juniper worked side by side through all of it, partners in every sense of the word. Pierce thought about Josephine and Cole occasionally, usually when something reminded him of that painful day at the stage depot. He heard through the grapevine that they had settled in Montana and were doing well, had children of their own. He felt no bitterness about it anymore, only a distant sadness for the friendship that had been lost. Juniper had been right that people could be two things at once. Cole had been a good friend and had made a choice that hurt Pierce deeply, and both things were true. Pierce could acknowledge the years of brotherhood without excusing the betrayal. It was complicated, like all human relationships, and he had made peace with that complexity. One evening in the summer of 1890, Pierce and Juniper were sitting on the porch watching their children play in the yard. James was almost 6 now, a sturdy boy with Pierce's gray eyes and Juniper's dark hair. Clara was 4, fearless and funny, always getting into some kind of mischief. Thomas was barely 2, still toddling around on unsteady legs trying to keep up with his older siblings. "You ever regret it?" Juniper asked, her head resting on Pierce's shoulder. "Walking away from her, from them, not even for a second," Pierce said, and he meant it absolutely. "Walking away was the best thing I ever did. It brought me to you." "I am glad," Juniper said, "because I cannot imagine my life without you." "You saved me, Pierce, in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Pierce said. "You gave me a reason to believe in love again, to trust that good things were still possible. You gave me a family and a home and a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The children's laughter rang out across the yard, and Pierce felt a deep sense of contentment settle over him. This was what happiness looked like. Not the fairy tale romance he had imagined with Josephine, full of grand gestures and passionate declarations, but something quieter and deeper. The everyday miracle of waking up beside someone you loved, of working together toward shared goals, of building a life one day at a time. As the years continued to unfold, Pierce and Juniper's love only grew stronger. They weathered the inevitable storms that all marriages face with communication, compromise, and an unshakable commitment to each other. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight, the usual challenges of raising children and running a large ranch operation. Through all of it, they relied on each other, their partnership the bedrock on which everything else was built. When James turned 10 in 1894, Pierce began teaching him the more advanced aspects of ranching, and he discovered that his son had a natural talent for working with horses. James could gentle the wildest colt with patience and soft words, and Pierce felt a fierce pride watching him work. Clara showed more interest in the business side of things, sitting with Juniper as she did the accounts and asking endless questions about money and markets. Thomas, still young, seemed content to follow his siblings around and imitate everything they did. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, and by 1895 Pierce and Juniper were well established as one of the most respected ranching families in Idaho. They employed several hands now, good men who were treated fairly and paid well, and the operation ran like a well-oiled machine. Pierce found satisfaction in the work, but even more satisfaction in the life he had built beyond the work. The evenings spent with his family, the lazy Sunday afternoons when they would all ride out together to check fences or move cattle, the quiet moments alone with Juniper when the children were in bed and they could simply be together. These were the things that made everything worthwhile. In the spring of 1896, something unexpected happened. Pierce was in Lewiston picking up supplies when he ran into a familiar face. Cole Montgomery was standing outside the telegraph office, looking older and weathered but still recognizable. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of 12 years of silence hanging between them. "Pierce," Cole finally said, his voice uncertain, "I was not sure you would speak to me." "I was not sure either," Pierce admitted. His first instinct had been to turn away, to avoid the conversation entirely, but something made him stay. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the confidence that came from being genuinely happy with his life. He did not need closure from Cole, but perhaps he could offer it. "I am in town for a few days," Cole said. "Buying breeding stock. I heard about your ranch, about how well you are doing. I am glad, Pierce. I have thought about you over the years, wondered if you were all right." "I am more than all right," Pierce said. "I am married, have 3 children, have a ranch that is everything I ever wanted." "What about you?" "Similar," Cole said. 4 children, actually. Josephine and I are doing well in Montana. We have a good life." He paused, then added quietly, "But I have regretted what happened. Not marrying her, I could never regret that, but the way it happened. The way we hurt you. That has stayed with me, Pierce. It has weighed on me all these years." Pierce considered the man in front of him, the former best friend who had been such a huge part of his life. The anger he had once felt was long gone, replaced by something close to indifference. Cole was just another person now, someone from his past who no longer had power over his present. "I forgive you," Pierce said, and he was surprised to find he meant it. "It took me a long time to get there, but I do. You and Josephine did what was right for you, and even though it hurt like hell at the time, it led me exactly where I needed to be. So thank you in a strange way for breaking my heart. It healed into something better." Cole's eyes filled with tears. "I do not deserve your forgiveness," he said hoarsely. "Probably not," Pierce agreed. "But I am not giving it for your sake. I am giving it for mine. I do not want to carry anger around anymore. I do not want to waste energy on resentment when I could be spending that energy on my family." So I forgive you and I release you from whatever guilt you have been carrying. We are square, Cole. Go home to your wife and children and be happy. That is all I want for you." "Thank you," Cole said. "That means more than you know." They shook hands, a formal gesture that held none of the warmth of their old friendship, but also none of the bitterness of their parting. Then Pierce walked away, back to his wagon and his supplies and the life that was waiting for him. He felt lighter somehow, as if some burden he had not even realized he was carrying had been lifted. When he got home and told Juniper about the encounter, she held him close and kissed his temple. "I am proud of you," she said. "It takes strength to forgive someone who hurt you that badly." "It was easier than I expected," Pierce said. "I think time and distance and having you helped. I am not the same man I was 12 years ago. That Pierce was devastated by what happened. This Pierce has moved so far past it that it barely seems real anymore." "That is healing," Juniper said. "Real, deep healing. You have done the work, love. You have built a life that does not need anything from your past." "Except you," Pierce said, pulling her close. "I need you, always you." The children came running in then, James excited about a mare that was about to foal, Clara demanding that someone settle an argument she was having with Thomas, and Thomas just wanting to be picked up and cuddled. Pierce and Juniper separated to handle the chaos of parenting, but they kept finding each other's eyes across the room, sharing the kind of private looks that came from years of partnership and love. As James had predicted, the mare foaled that night, a beautiful filly with good lines and a gentle temperament. The whole family stayed up to watch, and Pierce felt his heart swell as he looked at his children's faces, alight with wonder and excitement. This was what he had walked away to find, though he had not known it at the time. Not just a wife or a ranch or financial success, but a family, a legacy, a love that would outlast him. The years continued to pass in that way, full of the ordinary miracles that make up a life. James grew into a young man and took on more responsibility with the ranch. Clara developed a sharp business mind and began handling more of the financial aspects. Thomas found his calling in breeding and training horses, showing the same natural talent his older brother had. More children came, 2 more daughters in 1897 and 1900, rounding out the family at 5 children total. Pierce and Juniper grew older together, their hair going gray, their hands becoming weathered from decades of work, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something solid and unshakable. They celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1903 with a big party that brought together friends and neighbors from across the region. Their children gave speeches that made them both cry, talking about the example of love and partnership their parents had set. "You two make marriage look easy," one of the neighbors commented to Pierce during the party. "It is not easy," Pierce said honestly. "But it is worth every bit of work we put into it. And it helps when you marry the right person, someone who is not just your lover but your best friend and partner in everything." He found Juniper in the crowd and caught her eye, and she smiled at him the way she had been smiling at him for 20 years, full of warmth and affection and deep contentment. Pierce made his way to her side and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Happy anniversary," he said softly. "Happy anniversary," she replied. "Thank you for these 20 years. They have been the best of my life." "Mine too," Pierce said, "and we have many more ahead of us still." They did have many more years, good years full of watching their children grow up and start families of their own, full of grandchildren running through the house and working the ranch, full of the satisfaction that comes from building something that will outlast you. Pierce and Juniper remained active in the ranch operations well into their 60s, only gradually turning over more responsibility to James and the younger generation. In the summer of 1910, Pierce and Juniper took a rare trip together, just the two of them, riding out to the river where Pierce had proposed all those years ago. They were both in their 50s now, gray-haired and weathered but still strong, still healthy. They sat on the bank and watched the water flow past, the same as it always had. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Pierce asked. "Of course," Juniper said. "You were so nervous when you proposed. Your hands were shaking." "I was terrified you would say no," Pierce admitted. "Even though we had already talked about marriage, I was still afraid." "I was never going to say no," Juniper said. "I loved you then and I love you now more with every year that passes. You have given me such a good life, Pierce, such a happy life." "You gave me the same," Pierce said. "You gave me everything, actually. A home, a family, a reason to keep going when I thought I had nothing left. I do not know who I would be without you." "Someone sadder," Juniper said with a small smile. "Someone lonelier. But we do not have to think about that because we found each other, and we have had 26 years together, and we will have many more." They did have more years, watching their children become successful ranchers and business people in their own right, watching their grandchildren grow, participating in the community they had helped build. The ranch that Pierce had started alone and that Juniper had saved from foreclosure became one of the largest and most successful operations in Idaho, a testament to their hard work and partnership. Pierce lived to be 73, dying peacefully in his sleep in 1929 with Juniper beside him, his children and grandchildren filling the house. His last words were to Juniper, whispered so softly only she could hear them. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. I will find you again, in whatever comes next." Juniper lived for 3 more years after Pierce passed, long enough to see their youngest grandchild married and to know that the family legacy was secure. When she died in 1932 at the age of 73, surrounded by the family they had built together, her last thoughts were of Pierce, of the day he had shown up at her door offering help when she needed it most, of the way he had looked at her the first time he kissed her, of the thousands of ordinary moments that had added up to an extraordinary life. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down through James, and then to his children and their children. The house Pierce built still stood, sturdy and strong, and family stories told over Sunday dinners always came back to Pierce and Juniper, to the love story that had started from heartbreak and had bloomed into something beautiful. People in Lewiston remembered them. The cowboy who had walked away with dignity when his fiancée arrived already married to his best friend, and the widow he had helped save from foreclosure. They remembered the partnership Pierce and Juniper had built, the way they had worked side by side for decades, the example they had set of what real love looked like. Not a fairy tale, but something better and more real. A love built on respect and trust and daily choosing each other, through the good times and the hard times, through all the years of their lives. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Idaho mountains in shades of gold and rose, the descendants of Pierce and Juniper would stand on that same porch where their ancestors had watched their children play, and they would feel the presence of that love still lingering, still strong, a foundation that had held firm for generations and would continue to hold firm for generations to come. The heartbreak that had brought Pierce to Juniper's door had transformed into something lasting and beautiful. Proof that sometimes the best things in life come not from the dreams we planned, but from the ones we never saw coming. The ones that find us when we are brave enough to walk away from what is not meant for us and open enough to recognize what is.